pondering the difference between a cheap inside cabin on a cruise ship, which I just had on the Marina of the Seas, the difference between that and a cheap motel room. I've stayed in plenty of cheap motel rooms, the cheapest in an area. That's where Sharon and I stayed when we were young and we were traveling. Stayed in cheap motels. Now I am going to explain the difference between a cheap inside cabin and a cheap motel. Well, they both have this in common though. They're cheap. They're way underpriced from the real estate above you in the cruise ship. A cheap motel, and I can tell you this from experience, has stained and ripped carpeting. A cheap motel has stained and worn out furniture. A cheap motel has towels that are really sandpaper bleached white. A cruise ship, cheap cabin, the cheapest cabin in a cruise ship is not like that. Oh, another thing a cheap motel has is they'll have truckers barbecuing outside next to your cabin. And generally, the cheap motel is in the highest crime area in the town or the city you are staying in. Now, compare that to the cheapest cabin on a cruise ship. Yes, there's no windows. The price is low. The cabin may be small, but the cabin is clean. The towels are just as nice as in the suites. The furniture is perfect. No ripped furniture, no stained furniture. The carpeting is clean. No stains, no rips on the carpeting. And yet this is the cheapest cabin. And it has a room steward. I don't care how cheap the cabin is, you got a room steward. Try to get that in a cheap motel. Get a room steward. It isn't going to happen. Also, the cheap cabin is in a safe area. The area that the cheap cabin is in the cruise ship, is just as safe as the penthouse suites. And in the cheap inside cabin, you're only minutes away from any action and activity on the ship. Whereas in a cheap motel room, you're going to have to drive a long way to get to where the nice things are going on. So that's just some of the difference between a cheap motel room and a cheap cabin on the cruise ship.